Brooklyn Center. The police chief in a Minneapolis suburb where a black man was fatally shot during a traffic stop said Monday that he believes the officer who fired intended to use a taser, not a handgun. Brooklyn Center Police Chief Tim Cannon described the shooting as an accidental discharge. The State Bureau of Criminal Apprehension was investigating. Daunte Wright, 20, died Sunday in a metropolitan area that was already on edge because of the trial of the first of 4 police officers charged in George Floyd's death. Cannon said at a news conference that the officer made a mistake, and he released body camera footage from the officer who fired. The footage showed 3 officers around a stopped car. When another officer attempts to handcuff Wright, a struggle ensues. The officer is heard shouting "Taser" several times before firing her weapon. This was an accidental discharge that resulted in a tragic death of Mr. Wright, the chief said. Brooklyn Center Mayor Mike Elliott called the shooting deeply tragic. "We are going to do everything we can to ensure that justice is done and our communities are made whole," he said. Minnesota Gov. Tim Walz tweeted that he was praying for Wright's family, as our state mourns another life of a black man taken by law enforcement. Speaking before the unrest, Wright's mother, Katie Wright, urged protesters to stay peaceful and focused on the loss of her son. "All the violence, if it keeps going, it's only going to be about the violence. We need it to be about why my son got shot for no reason," she said to a crowd near the shooting scene in Brooklyn Center, a city of about people on the northwest border of Minneapolis. "We need to make sure it's about him and not about smashing police cars, because that's not going to bring my son back." Protesters who gathered near the scene waved flags and signs reading "Black Lives Matter." Others walked peacefully with their hands held up. On one street, someone wrote in multicolored chalk, "Justice for Daunte Wright." Katie Wright said her son called her as he was getting pulled over. "All he did was have air fresheners in the car, and they told him to get out of the car," Wright said. During the call, she said she heard scuffling and then someone saying, "Daunte, don't run," before the call ended. When she called back, her son's girlfriend answered and said he had been shot. Authorities said the car was pulled over for having expired registration, and after determining the driver had an outstanding warrant, police said they tried to arrest him. Then the driver re-entered the vehicle, and an officer fired, striking him, police said. The vehicle traveled several blocks before striking another vehicle. Wright's family offered a different account, with Katie Wright saying her son was shot before getting back into the car. A female passenger sustained non-life-threatening injuries during the crash, authorities said. Katie Wright said that passenger was her son's girlfriend. Court records show Wright was being sought after failing to appear in court on charges that he fled from officers and possessed a gun without a permit during an encounter with Minneapolis police in June. In that case, a statement of probable cause said police got a call about a man waving a gun who was later identified as Wright. Shortly after the shooting, demonstrators began to gather, with some jumping atop police cars. Marchers also descended on the Brooklyn Center Police Department, where rocks and other objects were thrown at officers, authorities said. The protesters had largely dispersed by 1:15 a.m. Monday. President Joe Biden was briefed on the shooting, and the White House has been in touch with the governor, mayor and local law enforcement, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said. "We were incredibly saddened to hear about the loss of life at the hands of law enforcement in Minnesota yesterday," she said. National Guard troops and law enforcement officers continued to guard the front of the police department on Monday morning. Police were erecting a concrete barrier as Minnesota State Patrol officers joined the line in front of the precinct. Several people and reporters watched from across the street as traffic returned to normal on the street where protesters were met with tear gas the night before. One man yelled at the officers using a megaphone as others flew Black Lives Matter flags. About 20 businesses were broken into at the city's Shingle Creek Shopping Center, Minnesota Department of Public Safety Commissioner John Harrington said at a news conference. The National Guard was activated, and Brooklyn Center Mayor Mike Elliott announced a curfew that expired shortly before daybreak. Police said Brooklyn Center officers wear body cameras, which they believe were activated during the traffic stop. The trial of Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis officer charged in Floyd's death, continued Monday. Floyd, a black man, died May 25 after Chauvin, who is white, pressed his knee against Floyd's neck. Prosecutors say Floyd was pinned for 9 minutes, 29 seconds. No National Guard members and state law enforcement personnel were to be deployed around the Twin Cities and in Brooklyn Center, in addition to teams already in place for Chauvin's trial at the Hennepin County Courthouse in Minneapolis, Harrington said. There was no visible increase in the already high security presence on Monday morning outside the courthouse, which was fortified ahead of Chauvin's trial with tall fencing topped with barbed wire and coils of razor wire between the fences and concrete barriers. Meanwhile, all Brooklyn Center students were to attend online classes Monday because school buildings were closed, Superintendent Carly Baker said.